Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Garhdo Goes Geek. On today's episode, I'm doing a little review for a film that I had hoped to see sooner than this. I was unable to actually get around to see it in the cinema. It's recently come onto home streaming, so I rented it because this was a movie that I really wanted to pay money for because I've heard a lot of good things about it and I was excited about it from the moment I saw the first trailer. So I think, if you do care about a movie, you should support it. So this is what I've done. And that movie is Blue Beetle, the latest superhero property from DC. And the first DC film in their ongoing continuity that seems to be part of the DC cinematic universe rather than the DC extended universe. So I thought we could discuss it, have a look at it as a film, see if it's any good. Try and keep this relatively spoiler free. There might be a little spoiler section at the end. So enjoy. So, who is Blue Beetle? Blue Beetle is Jaime Reyes, a young Mexican college student who ends up bonded to an alien scarab. The scarab essentially is able to generate for him a suit of powered armor with bug-like beetle elements that's bright blue. And is able to conjure things like weapons, swords, blasters, all that sort of thing. Essentially turns him into a very, very powerful soldier. Now, in the comics, Blue Beetle is also a legacy character. Jaime Reyes is the third of the actual Blue Beetles. The first two are Dan Garrett and Ted Kord. Dan Garrett first appeared in the 40s along with a lot of DC characters. I think he was created, if I remember, he was created for Charlton Comics originally. And then, of course, Charlton Comics was bought up by DC, and that's where the character of Ted Kord was created. Ted Kord was created in part by Steve Ditko, and I think he was created in the 70s, I believe, if not a bit sooner. Sorry, 60s, 66. He first appeared, and he was folded into the main DC universe in the 80s, along with as part of Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he would go on to be a popular pairing with Booster Gold, who is a character that is obviously going to be debuting in the DC cinematic universe. Jaime, however, actually debuted as Blue Beetle and got the powers in a very recent comic. It was Infinity Crisis, which was released in 2006-2007. Now, this makes, I think, this film the property. One of the properties that is based on a comic book character that did not that has originated in the 21st century, and I can think of only two others that do that, which are Batwoman, the series on CW, because Kate Kane as Batwoman debuted a few months after Jaime, and Miss Marvel on Disney Plus, which obviously the character of Kamala Khan appears in 2014, 2015, I want to say, for the first time. So, obviously it's a legacy character. It goes back years, but, most comic book heroes who headline their own properties, whether it's films or TV, debuted in the 60s or 70s or even earlier. Whereas that's not the case here. I will say that the Jaime Reyes as well is the only iteration of the character that has actually been bonded to the scarab and has this exact power set. Dan Garrett and Ted Kord were actually just costumed heroes. So why am I giving you the backstory on all of this? In fact, briefly, while I said they were costume heroes, the Ted Cord version of Blue Beetle was actually the inspiration behind the character of Owlman in Watchmen. Because obviously, as I believe I mentioned previously, Alan Moore originally planned to make Watchmen using the Charlton Comics characters. So obviously, Peacemaker, The Question, Nightshade, and Blue Beetle, and a couple of others. I can't remember who they all are. So obviously, when he was told that he couldn't use the Charlton characters because DC had other plans for them, and he created his own, he based them on the Charlton heroes. So this is why things like Owlman with his owl ship and things like that is based on Ted Cord's Blue Beetle bug ship that he has. This is all relevant. Yeah, this is all relevant. But Jaime Reyes is a very popular character, and one of the things that makes him incredibly popular is that he is obviously a Latin character. He gives Latino representation. There's a lot of ongoing debate in comic book circles about how they shouldn't change characters, they should create their own characters and have those characters be this thing. Jaime Reyes, I think if he came out now, would be petitioned in that exact same way, because it's a legacy character. It's Blue Beetle's name, but he's a Latin character with a different power set. So compared to the previous Blue Beetle, Ted Cord, he's Blue Beetle in name only. He doesn't have the same powers. He doesn't have the same abilities, but he is Blue Beetle, and he's a great addition. Like, I've read Infinite Crisis where he debuted. I've read some of his individual issues, not as much as I would like, but I do enjoy everything I've read with the character in it. And then obviously, he went on to be popular enough that he was heavily requested as a fighter for Injustice 2. So obviously he was included in that. It was a lot of fun in that. And yeah, he's just a character that's nice to see. And this film was developed by DC. It was originally supposed to be one of those films that they were going to debut on HBO Max. This was the plan with things like Batgirl, Black Canary. They were going to start doing 6 films a year, and it would be 3 in the big screen and 3 on HBO Max, and so on and so forth. Didn't always work out. That didn't work out at all, really. But one of the things that changed for this was DC was apparently very, very impressed with the first footage that they got. This is directed by Angel Manuel Soto, written by Garhdo Alcocer. Probably butchered these names. But Latino directors, Hispanic directors and writers. The director Manuel Soto is Puerto Rican. So they've got that voice in there. In fact, most of the cast is Latin actors, because it's the people playing Jaime's family, the Reyes family. So it's Adriana Barraza as Nana, Damian Alcazar as Alberto Reyes, his father, Elpida Carrillo as Rocio Reyes. She was the woman from Predator, the very first Predator film. So she was great in this. And Belissa Escobedo, who was also in Hocus Pocus 2 as Jaime's younger sister. And there's also Bruna Marquezin as Mazakin, as Jenny Cord, who is Jaime's kind of love interest in this as well. And Jaime Reyes himself is played by Xolo Mariduena, who is from Cobra Kai. And in fact, the director actually said he was the only person he considered for the role. He basically was that enamored with Mariduena from Cobra Kai, and obviously seeing him do like his action role, seeing him using his martial arts skills in that, and obviously his charisma, and just being like, yeah, I can't picture anyone else as Jaime. And I think it was a really good choice. The film itself actually has quite an overwhelming amount of Spanish dialogue. Obviously, it's all subtitled for people like me who don't speak Spanish. Um, there is even some Portuguese dialogue, I think, as well, because obviously, like I said, Jenny Cord, the actress who played her, she's Portuguese. Sorry, Brazilian. So she speaks Portuguese. And she has a couple of lines in Portuguese. One of the main villains as well, Raul Max Trujillo, as Ignacio Carapax. He has quite a few lines that are in Spanish as well. In fact, I think I did read somewhere that there's overwhelmingly Spanish dialogue in this, and I really like it. And I was watching this for the first time with the family, watching it with the kids, Tallulah and Zulu, and we were watching it, and we were finding the dialogue really good because all the Spanish dialogue, and Zulu pointed out how refreshing it was, and the Nana especially entirely speaks Spanish. She doesn't speak English at any point in the film. She's entirely speaking in Spanish, and the Nana's great. She's one of the best characters, one of the best members of the family. She has some great moments. Um, but what I noticed is it seemed to change through the generations. So the Nana's speaking entirely in Spanish. Jaime's parents are speaking sort of half and half. They speak mainly Spanish to Nana, but they also speak mainly English to their kids, along with Uncle Rudy, who's played by George Lopez. Um, their language is more mixed between the English and Spanish, and if they do speak Spanish to their children, but there's usually a lot more English in there as well. Whereas Jaime and his sister Milagros speak overwhelmingly English, but they do have some Spanish fitted in, especially when speaking to their other family members. I like that. It shows like sort of a generation gap, because obviously this is like a second or third generation immigrant family. So yeah, I really like that. That felt, having known not American immigrants, obviously, because I'm not American, but having known immigrant families here in Britain, especially ones who are like second or third generation, I have seen that where they're speaking in their native languages. Um, the parents and the grandparents, the older generation, they'll tend to speak, in the examples I saw, Hindi and Urdu, and then the younger kids speak mostly English. Whereas the parents kind of act as the go-between between the two generations. So yeah, that was very cool because I could relate to that. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, this is a huge landmark for representation, because I don't think we've had a proper Hispanic hero in Marvel or DC at this point, and I think Jaime is the one to go for. He's a very popular character, and there's a lot in the way his character evolves throughout the story that is familiar to a lot of people. He's a young hero who gets given powers and, you know, ends up in over his head dealing with super science and an evil corporation and things like that, and just trying to protect the people around him, the people he loves. There's a lot of commonality with a lot of other teen heroes, especially someone like Spider-Man, for example. There's clear narrative, like thematic connections, thematic similarities between something like Blue Beetle and the Spider-Man films, and seeing that development of the character. And so I really enjoyed that. And then, but there's elements of this that are just very different as well. Like Jaime's first transformation with the scarab, which is all over the trailers, so I'm not spoiling anything with this. It's quite terrifying, like in a very PG-13 way. The director actually said he was aiming for sort of like a David Cronenberg, but for kids kind of thing. And he has Jaime transform with the scarab in front of his family, and it looks Jaime looks like he's in pain. He looks like he's being pinned, like it's beyond his control. His family are terrified, and yeah, it's a very good, very riveting scene. But yeah, let's go to the plot of the film. Um, the plot concerns, well, Jaime comes back home to his family. He's been away at college. They're facing eviction due to financial difficulties. He's trying to get a job, ends up working at the mansion of Victoria Cord. Victoria Cord is the co-founder and CEO of Cord Industries, who we'd previously seen digging in the Arctic. They end up getting fired because Jaime overhears a confrontation between Victoria and her niece Jenny and sort of intervenes, kind of defending Jenny. And it sort of enamours Jenny to him, but ends up with him being fired by Victoria. So Jenny tells Jaime to meet her at Cord Tower the next day for a job opportunity. He goes along. Meanwhile, Victoria has found the scarab, the blue beetle scarab, and she is trying to use it to develop her own military project, which is called the OMAC, the One Man Army Corps. And she's trying to use the scarab to power the OMAC. Now, the OMAC was a project that Jenny's father, who's revealed to be deceased, it was a project that he was against, and Victoria's trying to activate it. Victoria's played by Susan Sarandon, by the way. In this, she's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It's one of the most entertaining roles I think I've ever seen her in. She's fantastic. And the character of Victoria is just sublime in the best ways. But yeah, Jenny sort of finds the scarab, steals it, and to avoid security, gives it to Jaime and tells him to flee with it. And like I said, I'm not spoiling much. A lot of this is in the trailer. Jaime takes it, the scarab activates, fuses with him, gives him the armored exoskeleton. That then leads to a chase because obviously Victoria wants the scarab and all sorts of things like that. And that's how the plot progresses from there. There's a lot of nice stakes set up quite early. A lot of tension, both for Jaime's personal life and then obviously now his new superhero life. And obviously they all dovetail and they're all kind of related to the Cords as well. And there's a real sort of divide, there's a huge class divide between obviously the Cords and the Reyes family, as well as the racial divide. And I think the film does that brilliantly, and really kind of highlights the differences between them, and most especially which side you should be on. It's very, very clear who the villain is. But yeah, the film itself, it's very well shot. It's bright. It's colorful. The characters are very engaging. Like I said, Xolo Maridueña, especially as Jaime Reyes, he is very, very good. Very believable as someone who is just completely in over his head, which for a lot of the film he is. You get the scarab as well is actually given like a sentience, which I think it does have in the comics as well. In this, it's called Khaji-Da, and it's voiced by Becky G, who I only know from her work on the 2017 Power Rangers film, but I did quite like her in that, so that's fine with me. She's pretty good for a disembodied voice. The Blue Beetle suit as well looks fantastic, and as far as I can tell, a lot of the time it is a practical suit. The action scenes are very good. There's a lot of CGI going on, but unlike a lot of other DC films, the CGI actually doesn't feel like it takes over the scene at any point. It just feels like it's enhancing it. Other films like Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, even something like Black Adam, as you know, or Flash as recently as that, the CGI was of like quite varying quality, and if it did take over in the action sequences, it would everything would become CGI and it become a bit of a mess. That's not the case here. There's still a lot of practical effects, and the CGI is just being used to enhance what's actually on screen, and that works really well. Um, and it's not that just DC do this; Marvel do this as well, and not every time that Marvel does it works either. Um, in fact, if anything, this is probably the most Marvel-looking film DC have done, and that's not a slight. That's not anything negative. Like in terms of tone and feeling, there's a lot more similarity here to the output of the Marvel universe, and like I said, especially films like Spider-Man, than there is anything else that DC have done. A lot of DC's films up until now have been quite dark, quite adult. That's not the case here. This is, a perfectly family friendly film. It's focused around the young hero and the interactions he's having with the people around him, especially his family. The closest analog that DC has is probably the first Shazam, and Shazam was really good. Like that was a really high bar, and I think this is the first film I've probably enjoyed from DC as much as Shazam. In that same way of just like the pure glee of just like, yeah, this is a really well made, really solid, really emotional film, um that feels very true and genuine. Not to say DC haven't done other good films. They have. Like, in fact, this is Blue Beetle is one of only 5 DCEU films that is rated fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And the other 4 are, again, the films that I would say are some of the best in DC's offering, which are The Suicide Squad, the James Gunn version, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman, and Shazam. And this one's up there with that. It's got a lot more similarity to something like Shazam than it does even something like Aquaman. And, as good as Aquaman was, and as family friendly as bits of Aquaman are, in terms of the tone, this feels much more similar to Shazam than to Aquaman or Wonder Woman or anything else that we've had before in this universe. And I think it's great, and I think it's a good sign of where the DCEU could go next, because obviously the DCEU as it was is coming to an end. I'm doing my own podcast episode on that. That's coming out once the strikes are over. And so in that respect, that universe is over. And like I said, Peter Safran was involved in this, and I think it's quite possibly as a result of this film that Peter Safran is up there as the co-head of DC Films now, alongside James Gunn. Like, that announcement came like a month afterwards, and in fact the casting of Xolo Maridueña came at the premiere of The Suicide Squad. So there's been a lot of connections between the two. And I think James Gunn and or Peter Safran have confirmed that Xolo Maridueña is one of a few characters who they are one of the few actors they are planning to keep using in the role as the same character. So he will be returning as Jaime Reyes in what they're planning to do. But I think part of the reason why this didn't do well in the cinema, because it didn't, it was actually the lowest performing film in the DCU, and I don't think that's fair at all. Um, it had a production budget of 104 million and only grossed 129 million worldwide. And that's a real shame. because this is great. It's so much fun. But I think a large part of, I'm not going to kid myself and say a large part of what affected its performance is the sort of limbo state that everything is in between the old DCEU and the new DCU. I know that's because most people don't give a damn about any of that. That is stuff that is the sort of geek minutiae that affects people like us, people like myself, and commentators on the industry and things like that. That those are the sort of people who care about those sort of minutiae and lore. To most people, this is just another DC film. And I think the problem is that the DCEU brand, well, the DC brand, has become kind of tainted because, I mean, if you look at the films that have been released, they are on a downward decline in terms of box office, and they have been for a long time. The only exceptions are Batman and Joker, and that's it. As much as people might say, well, yeah, but they're not part of the DCEU, that's not it. They're Batman and the Joker. They were always going to do well. Batman is the one thing that DC has ever released that has always consistently done well, you know? And this is why I think it is such a shame that they've squandered so much. Like, Blue Beetle is releasing off of the back of The Flash, Shazam, and Black Adam. I didn't see any of those in the cinema either, right? And I didn't pay for any of those either. And it's because they frankly looked awful. The trailers that I saw, the reviews I saw, the footage, the clips that I saw for all of those films did not make me want to go and see them. Blue Beetle, I wanted to see from the moment I saw that first trailer because it was funny and I could really tell what it was going for. I could see the core of the film here. It's like, okay, this is about a young kid and his family, and he gets superpowers, and then he has to fight someone who wants to steal the scarab from him, this evil industrialist. And I'm like, right, brilliant, that's fantastic. That's the sort of thing I want to see. And I'm really glad I did. And I'm really glad I paid for it because this film deserved to make more money than it did. Not for the executives, but for the actors. And I really want a sequel to this. I want this cast of characters to come back. I want to see more of Jaime Reyes. And I don't care if it's a Disney Plus style streaming series. I don't care if it's a movie straight for streaming or if it's another big budget blockbuster or even if it's just a guest appearance in another film. Like if they put the character in Blue Beetle in Booster Gold, which I'm really thinking they probably will at some point, or put him in Superman or something like that. I think there's a really good dynamic to have this young hero alongside the older heroes that they are going to introduce. Because Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, any other characters they introduce in that universe are going to be older. Like we're getting Batman the Brave and the Bold, so that's a Batman who has his sidekicks. He's an older Batman with Nightwing and Robin. So that means we could have Blue Beetle interacting with Nightwing and Robin. A Superman who's been doing this for a few years, but still seems relatively new, but could still take on a mentor role. There's a lot of promise here. And I think it's a shame it's done as poorly as it has. Because I don't think it deserves it at all. I will discuss my thoughts on a couple of spoilers in a minute, but I'm going to give you a break first. So if anything I've said has made you interested, I highly recommend seeing this film. I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. And, I think it's worth watching and worth enjoying. There's a lot of good stuff here and some great performances, some great direction, um, good effects, good action sequences, good score as well. Like the music's really good. There's a lot of like Hispanic needle drops, as well. Like the only big Western song that I remember seeing as a needle drop was "Kickstart My Heart," but it worked really well for the scene that they put it on. And needle drops in movies, especially the DCU movies, haven't always been great. So, but yeah, it's really good. It's one of the best films DC have done ever, I think. Um, so yeah, I think you'd really enjoy it. So, some thoughts on spoilers. So, last chance to turn around and back out if you haven't. So, yeah, the main villain of this film is Victoria Cord as Susan Sarandon as Victoria Cord. She is evil. I think she might be one of the most despicably evil villains I have seen in a comic book film, in any film actually, in a very long time. Um, there is there's no redeeming qualities to her at all. Like even with her having like a family connection, even with her having with to Jenny Cord, no, there's nothing about her that's redeemable. She is just casually cruel, racist, or very casually racist at least. She keeps Harvey Gillians is from What We Do in the Shadows is playing a doctor who's working for her. She refers to him as Sanchez the entire time. That's not his name, and he keeps trying to say that's not his name. She refuses to listen. She just constantly calls him Sanchez. She has Jaime captured during a siege on like his family's house, where the house burns down, and Jaime isn't there at the start. The house burns down, the family are all sort of taken out, the family gets shot at. Alberto, who was revealed earlier in the film to have a heart condition, died. He'd had a heart attack while Jaime was out at college. You know, he passes away. He dies of a heart attack, and Jaime gets dragged away before he can help him, before he can save him, before he can even do anything. He's not even allowed to be there with his family to grieve. You know, it's just awful. And then we find out what she did to Carapax, like Ignacio Carapax. Like she's evil. Like I sat there, just watching her, and I'm like, and Susan Sarandon is playing her brilliantly. But she's despicable. There is no redeeming quality to the character at all. She is just awful, and you want to see her die. you know, um, and yeah, I can't remember the last time I felt that way about a villain, especially a villain in a comic book film, because she is so evil in such a very relatable way, like in a very realistic way. She's not after power, she's just trying to make money. The whole OMAC thing. She wants to use the scarabs to power the OMACs so that she can sell them to the military industrial complex and make herself a fortune. That's her whole goal. And she doesn't care who she steps on, who gets in her way, because she will just remove them as an obstacle. Yeah, she's fully evil. I don't know the character of Carapax from the comic, but I do know Omax from the comics. The Omax are actually a main villain of sorts in the Infinite Crisis book, and specifically in the lead up to Infinite Crisis. And in fact, Jaime Reyes joins like Batman's group to try and stop the Omax as part of the Infinite Crisis storyline. Um, so having them as the villain, I thought was really cool. And there's like a demo reel video that you see Victoria watching, and it's like when she said that and it was revealed that it was the OMAC, I was just like, oh, that's awesome. And the idea of using the scarab to power the OMAC, I thought that was really cool. The Jenny as well, Jenny is really good, and we get to see her father's stuff, and it's revealed that her father was actually the Blue Beetle. So Ted Cord was the Blue Beetle, the previous Blue Beetle, and we see he's got like a little beetle lair, a beetle cave type thing under his mansion, where we see all this sort of all this blue lighting, and it's an amazing set, really good set. But there's like suits out, and the suits are the Ted Cord Blue Beetle suit and the Dan Garrett Blue Beetle suit, which I thought was great. And there's like the Blue Beetle bug ship, and like Rudy, who's like a bit of a techno whiz, just immediately starts like looking at bits and trying to do what he can to try and do all these things with it. And this is where you get the line from the trailer of like, Batman's a fascist, and it's like, I completely get why a sort of punk, because Rudy Reyes is a punk, but like in the best, like in the best way, like a very anti-establishment. Why an anti-establishment Latin immigrant would think that someone like Batman is a fascist. Yeah, I get why people on the internet took that completely the wrong way but it's like you don't even need context. The context comes from the character. There's not much context added within the film that sets up that joke and makes it work. It's a good joke. I really liked it. George Lopez as well as Rudy does a really great job. He has some great lines. It's very memorable. He's desperately trying to help and try and do the right thing, because it's also going to mess up with the chords, and he seems very happy for that. He seems initially distrusting of Jenny, but when it's revealed that Jenny's father was the Blue Beetle, he's like, okay, that's brilliant, because he knew who the Blue Beetle was. Like, he remembers the Blue Beetle from when he was a kid. So, it means something to him. And it's kind of implied that that's where Jaime's superhero name is going to come from. Now, we never find out who Ted Cord was. Like, we don't see any pictures of him or anything like that. However, there is a mid-credit sequence where a recording is broadcast in the lab, from Ted trying to say that he's still alive. So he's not dead, he's just vanished. And I thought that was cool. That was a really good like sequel bait thing. That's a really good example of like a post credits to build on later on, because there's so many ways you can go with that. Like, just based on my own minor knowledge of Blue Beetle, it's like the Scarab was created by an alien race called the Reach. The Reach are an alien race that are opposed to the Green Lanterns. It's highly possible, like, it's revealed in the film that Ted Cord was studying the Scarab and was like looking for the Scarab as well. So it's entirely possible that he could have been captured by the Reach and maybe taken into space, and he's just now managing to send a message back to Earth. And the cameo appearance, he's not credited, which means if you want to go a different way and cast a big name actor as Ted Cord, you can completely easily. So yeah, that really works. And yeah, I liked it, I enjoyed it. And again, it would be cool to see more of the character, to see Ted Cord as well. Like, Ted Cord is a character that DC have been trying to do something with for a long time. Like, they tried to add him into the Arrowverse. Like, Brandon Routh's character of the Atom in Arrow Season 3, that was originally supposed to be Ted Cord. Like, Cord Industries has been mentioned a lot within the Arrowverse. And it was the idea that was supposed to be Ted Cord. And The people behind the Arrowverse, like Greg Berlanti and all that, they pitched this to DC, and DC were like, "Oh no, 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 you can't do that. We've got plans for the character." There are no plans. This is it. This is the closest we've gotten in what Arrow season 3 was. Oh god, what, 10 years ago? 2012, 2014. So yeah, nearly 10 years ago. And this is the closest we've got to doing anything with the character, because DC has this awful habit. Warner Brothers has had this awful habit when controlling DC, where it's like, well, we're using these characters in the films, so we can't use them in the TV because you can't have multiple versions of these characters because audiences will get confused, despite the fact there's been like something like 10 different Batmen running around in the past 20 years. But audiences will get confused. Most casual audiences don't care. They watch what they want to watch. They really don't give a damn. Most people who are going to watch something like the Arrowverse and see Ted Cord, if a Blue Beetle movie comes out 10 years later with Jaime Reyes as the lead and Ted Cord just happens to be in it, played by someone else, they're just going to be like, oh, okay, cool. Most people aren't going to watch them both. Yeah. Warner Brothers has annoyed me about things like this for a very long time, and it's not like it's a new thing that only started happening in the Arrowverse. No, it happened in Smallville, it happened with the Justice League cartoon series. It's been happening for a long time. Like when Green Arrow was introduced in Smallville, that was originally meant to be Bruce Wayne, and it was going to be Batman. So it's like, but it's like, no, you can't do that because we're doing the Christopher Nolan Batman films. All this stuff has been happening for a long time, and it's just part of that mismanagement of everything, which is just hampering their universe by hampering these properties by sort of kneecapping them before they're even out of the starting gate. Blue Beetle is a great character and has a lot of potential to become a fan favorite character. Like, this is the Latin superhero movie, basically. We haven't really had a Latin superhero. Like, Marvel haven't done a Latin superhero. There's no, I can't think of a Hispanic Marvel hero in the MCU. Even if you expand it to the TV stuff, there isn't really a singular, like, Hispanic hero. There's a Muslim hero, Kamala Khan. She's very, very popular. Like, her comics are exceedingly popular. Her series is exceedingly popular and very well received. As much as there's a whole generation of Marvel fans out there that will try and tell you, oh no, it's awful. I've never watched it. It looks terrible. It's just affirmative action. All that sort of usual bollocks that they like to recite whenever there's any sort of diversity. Blue Beetle has the potential. Jaime Reyes has the potential to be that for a Latin audience, and I don't know what it was. It didn't help that when this was released, it was released just as the actors' strike started, the SAG-AFTRA strike started. So you had this very good film, and none of the actors could do promotion for it. Like, this, I think, was the first big film release after the actors' strike began. So none of the whole press tour stopped. All this planned press gone overnight because the actors were on strike. And I completely get it. Like, I'm fully in support of the strikes. I've made that blindingly obvious. But it's just unfortunate timing, because it meant that these great actors, all that sort of press buzz that would lead to this being a really popular film and get the word of mouth out there on a character that most people wouldn't be aware of, didn't happen. And what that means is there's this really talented multicultural cast, with a multicultural cast and director and writer that have made this amazing film that is a love letter to this culture, but also to the hero within, the hero that DC has that kind of exemplifies that culture, and it's wasted almost. And it's a real shame. Like I would have wanted to see, like, Susan Sarandon is beloved, for example. Like, if she'd have done the press tour and been on things like, these late night talk shows, you know, as herself with Shola Mariduena, the her as the old villain, him as the young man, her as the acting legend, him as the young new fresh faced newcomer, and they'd both spoken about this film, it would have got people's attention. I mean, I saw the trailers on this online. I didn't really see much on telly or on YouTube. I saw it because I sought it out. And it's a real shame because it's good. It's really good. There so many bits in this, like the way the family come together. The family come together to save Jaime, because Jaime ends up captured by Victoria, like I said, and it's sort of the midpoint of the movie where the attack on the house happens. Like we had to stop the movie because it was getting late. The kids were all tired. I was like, okay, we'll stop it. We'll watch the rest tomorrow. And yeah, we stopped it there, and we still had like an hour of the movie left. There's a lot happening, and it's great. Like, Carapax has a really interesting character arc, like when you actually reveal some of his development, and there's a lot there with Carapax that's in his performance, in Raul Trujillo's performance. It's very understated, and there's a lot of nice facial stuff that really kind of hints at just everything that's going on below the surface. He's fantastic. As I said, Adriana Barraza as Nana, she is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Like, there's a scene, and it was in one of the trailers, so I did see it in like a TV spot that put, like, one of the few that I saw, um, of her with this gigantic minigun, just like spinning it around. It was like on the end of one of the TV spots or trailers. And then she gets to use it, and it turns out that, like, she's a revolutionary, like a proper, like, anti-establishment revolutionary. Um, oh, that was great. And then, it's like, because they can't really mourn Alberto in the actual movie itself after his passing, because they're resolving to rescue Jaime, and they team up with Jenny to do it. And Jenny gives them, because she says, "Oh, do you want to see my dad's toys?" Basically, and that's where Nana gets the minigun. It's something Blue Beetle had. But yeah, they team up, they rescue Jaime. They take the bug ship, they fly it to this island in Cuba. That's where you get the Kickstart My Heart sequence, and this is after Millie has spray painted the same thing that's on Rudy's truck onto it. So yeah, they rescue Jaime. Jaime has this big fight with Carapax. This week he gets the Buster Sword at one point, which again was also in the trailer. It looked really cool. There's just lots of nice moments, and then after all that action, that's when everything comes together at the end, the aftermath. And it's like, Jenny gets welcomed into the family. She offers to repair the damage. She's become the new CEO of Cord. She wants to help them rebuild their home, but she also wants to make Cord better. She's stopping the OMAC project, for example. She's cutting all ties to the military. And you know that's when they take the time to mourn Alberto. Like, they turn up back, and they're all in black, and they've obviously had a funeral or a frienda or something like that, where they are mourning him and laying him to rest. And that's when the community sort of comes together and rallies around them, and that's when Jenny comes in. And Yeah, it's nice. It feels as much about family in the same way as something like Shazam does. There's a lot of nice ties to family, but less of the found family. Although that does apply to Jenny's character, the idea of the found family, because she feels so because she's because of the divide between her and Victoria, she ends up being welcomed by Jaime's family, and I really like that. So yeah, there was a lot to like in this, and it really deserved better. And yeah, that's all I can really say about it. It deserved better, and the only other DC film that's coming out now, I think, before the new DCU is Aquaman 2. And I am not as drawn to that as I am to this. Like, this was the first trailer I saw for a DC film since Birds of Prey, where I was instantly like, I need to see this. And yeah, I'm not feeling that way about anything else. I just really hope there's more of this character, more of this concept, this hero, everything, because it's got so much damn potential. And it's because I like the characters that DC has that I really want them to do better. In fact, if anything, I think DC needs to break away from Warner Brothers. I don't think that's likely, but I think with the corporate restructuring that keeps going on at Warner Brothers, because it's been sold and shifted around twice in the past few years, it's hurting the creative output. Well, no, it's not hurting the creative output, because this was a creative thing and it was really good, but it's not helping it. It's not helping anything. So yeah, that's all I've really got to say about Blue Beetle. Yeah, my problems with the film aren't with the film. My problems with the film are with how the film was marketed and how it was managed by the studio. But the film itself is good, and I highly recommend it. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, I recommend seeing it whenever you're able to. If you're able to rent it, or if you're able to, buy it on Blu-ray, or even if you just watch it on a streaming service you're already paying for because you can't afford to give more money, it's absolutely fine. But I think showing support for the movie is the way to go. Now, in the meantime, my friends, you all just look after yourselves. I've got a few more reviews coming up very, very soon. The current strike, the writers' strike, is now over. The SAG-AFTRA strike is still ongoing. Talks have broken down on that one. So hopefully, it may be resolved soon. I think they are due to sit down at the discussion at the table and discuss things again soon. And then I can start releasing some of the other episodes I've been working on. But whether that's the case or not, there will still be content here. And there's going to be a lot of content coming when I'm able to. So, until then, you will look after yourselves, take the very best care of yourself, your physical and mental well-being especially. I know I've been suffering my own mental health recently. If anyone else is struggling, feel free to reach out to me. I am a qualified mental health first aider. I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone out there who needs help. You can reach me in all of the usual places. My social media links, everything like that, are all on my link tree. You all look after yourselves, take the very best care of yourselves. Until next time, everyone.
Thank you, my friends, for once again joining me on Garhdo Goes Geek. Your continued support for this podcast means the absolute world to me, and I am grateful for every single one of you who stays and listens to one of my episodes. It means the absolute world. Now, if you would like to engage more with me or the podcast, we have a Discord community, small but growing, and we now have commissions open on Ko-Fi. So if there's a topic you would like to see me cover, you can pay me to cover it. All funds will be used for legal purchase of the relevant items where I do not have them. Have a look on the link tree for more information. Until next time, look after yourselves.